Cool. So welcome everybody to the Lionhearts Discipleship Podcast. And if I've organized my technology correctly, we're streaming currently on Facebook, on YouTube, and on Twitter or X, whichever you prefer to call it. So if anyone who's watching or listening is having any difficulties with hearing or seeing Grace or myself, it'd be great if you could post a comment. I can see all your comments. And if you're liking what you're watching or hearing, it'd be encouraging to see those comments as well. Otherwise, we'll catch you on the replay. So, Grace is here with me this afternoon. If you're watching live, it's lunchtime on a Tuesday afternoon to talk about evangelizing Gen Z or Gen Z, just depending on what part of the world you're listening from. Being a member of Gen Z herself. So look, welcome Grace to the show. Great to have you here.
Thank you.
Yeah, so Grace is being my lab rat kind of as well. Good to see that you can be heard and seen. We can both be heard and seen. Thanks, Letitia. So Grace is going to share a little bit about her background, a bit about her faith and how she's being called to live out her missionary discipleship as a young evangelista. Thanks for being my lab rat, my first live stream guest on the show. I really appreciate that, Grace.
No worries.
So tell us a bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, etc.
Yeah. Well, I'm from the Gold Coast. I grew up here for most of my childhood. We lived in Melbourne for a couple of years and sort of different parts of Queensland, mainly around like the southeast, a bit over the border into New South Wales for a little bit. My dad was in the airlines, so we moved around quite a bit. So I'm the eldest of 7. We were all homeschooled, mainly because of the faith aspect, like the formation that Mum and Dad thought we would receive better at home than in, say, the public school system. But also because of the nature of Dad's work, it made it a lot easier. But yeah, it was primarily for the faith and also the education reasons. So yeah, I grew up living that lifestyle homeschool, which is very different to the mainstream, but I really enjoyed it. And again, it was all I knew, so it felt very normal to me. So the faith aspect for me was always very natural. Like we used to go when I was little. Mum used to take us off into daily mass when she could. Obviously Sunday mass every weekend. So from a very young age, we had like a solid faith formation. And I was also an avid reader when I was from about the age of, I think, 6. That's when I started reading a lot. So that also really helped me personally because Mum encouraged us to read, but I also took that on myself, like the love of reading myself. So that was something that really helped me in the faith because I love reading like Lives of the Saints, or even as I got older, obviously more in-depth spiritual content. So I remember when I was, I think, 13 or 14, I read Story of a Soul by St. Teresa's Little Flower, a book on St. Maria Goretti's life, which really inspired me. So I've always had a very strong faith background, but obviously as a child, it's not really fully yours until you kind of make that decision to make it your own. And I did that, I think, around the age of 12. I remember it was soon after. It was reading, I think, around the time that I was reading St. Maria Goretti's life, and from that it just seemed logical. It's like, of course I want to choose this. And as I got older, like early teens, mid-teens, even later teens, seeing the culture around me and the products of that, even though there's often like an element of glamour about it, I could see through it because I could see the destruction and like the ugliness of it, like past the just initial attraction. And I think that was because of such a strong faith background, and also being able to learn through like reading these books and having this strong background that it's not what the world says it is. So I guess, and having friends and seeing young people living the same way as me versus having friends and seeing young people live the way of the world, and kind of the fruits speak for themselves. And even though I was young, I don't know, I guess God had just given me that grace to see the lies, see through. Obviously, it's not like I knew everything, but I could see through the typical lies that the world tells young people, especially in those teenage years.
So I think it's fair to say that not your typical Gen Z kid, but regardless, you're still one of them. But I also just want to take you back to when you said when you're about 12 or 13, you're reading the life of Maria Goretti, and it was around that time and that experience of reading her life that you decided to make the personal decision to really have a relationship with Jesus. Can you tell me a little bit more deeply, like in a little bit more detail, what that was? Like, what in particular about her life spoke to you, and did you actually hear God's voice internally through that experience, and how did you respond to that?
Well, I remember reading it. It was there was a couple of things. It was her sort of heroic and uncommon courage, and also devotion to Christ to obviously, be a martyr for him, and that sort of intensity. It's like even in a lot of the lives of the saints, they weren't called to martyrdom, because martyrdom is obviously one of the most extreme sort of ways of laying down your life for Christ. I guess it's in the very realistic way. And she was only the same age as me, around 11 or something. So it was like, wow, that like even a kid can do things like that. You don't have to be this mystical, St. Thomas Aquinas to be a saint. And also another thing that I remember that really drew me was her purity, like that, the beauty of that virtue. Like I've always been very drawn to beauty. I think that's just the transcendental that I love. Like I love them all, but the one that most attracts me. And it was like her radiant purity, which is so different to everything we see young people advertised as now. And I loved it. And it was something I'd always been used to, obviously, the virtue, purity, and being Catholic. But it was so obvious in her. All the saints have purity, but that was like her, I guess, her trophy virtue. Or, that was like one of her big outstanding virtues. And I just really, for some reason, I just really loved that. And I remember after that just praying for like her type of purity. And I've always loved that virtue. And the opposite of it, like, it is repelling, but I find it like, I don't know, there was some grace with that book and her life. And I took her as one of my patron saints after that. I had like these row of little saint cards that I stuck on my wall of my friend saints, and they're all young ones. And she was one of them. I only had about 7, I think, like my particular friends.
Yeah, I resonate with that too. I also had a saint wall. Yeah. So once you finished your experience homeschooling, what was next for you? Is that when you started feeling a call to discern religious life, or did you feel that from the age that you read the book about Maria Goretti or St. Grace?
No. So that was kind of when I turned 18. It was more of a question, okay, well, now what do I do? Like, obviously, I want my life to be for God, whatever way he wants that, I'm not sure. So it was more just like an active decision. Okay, I'm going to be open to vocation, whatever that is, whether marriage, religious life. And it was around 18, 19 that like the potential of like religious life just as much as marriage came up. Like always growing up, it's like, oh yeah, you could be a nun, you can get married as Catholic, but it was always, just being a mum, because being the eldest of 7, you're very used to babies, and I loved it. Like I loved babies, and I loved having that role. So that was kind of the default, which it is for, I'd say, most people. But then when I was about 19, it was like when this, like the actual opportunity, or I guess question of religious life became just as relevant as marriage. So I knew I had to be open to that. It was quite exciting as well, having that, I guess, option become real. But obviously that comes with a lot of intensity, because it's not just a natural go-to thing. And that was part of it over a couple of years, where I entered into some serious stages of discernment, some overseas. And that was worth it. Obviously, I don't think I ended up being called to religious life, but even being open to that call and wanting to put God first was, I think, a natural product of like my slow growing faith over my teenage years. Like it wasn't like this sudden call or dramatic knowing that I'm called to this, because I never knew. I was always unsure. It was always, I'm not sure, but whatever God wants. I never had that clarity where some people do from a young age. But I think it was just more of a natural product of wanting to put God first in whatever way he calls me. So that could be in marriage, that could be whatever vocation it is. But being able to be open to that, I think, was a grace from just wanting to, to have Jesus as my first love, I guess.
Yeah. Awesome. So do you want to share a little bit more about the orders that you visited, what your experience was with them? And I guess I assume, I mean, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if those experiences helped you to obviously they helped you to clarify where you're going, but how they helped you to deepen your faith.
Well, the first ones I visited were a couple in the US. Actually, no, I visited 2 in Australia first, Dominicans and Carmelites. They were only over short periods of time, only less than a week. And it was more so just I want to at least start here, because I never felt like well, at least for the most part, I never felt a particular draw or call to a particular order. It was more just like, okay,
Sure.
if God wants me to be open to his plan, I'll be as open as I can and let him, I guess, draw me or decide from there. So it was more just like, let's just be open. Even though I didn't always want, it wasn't always something I emotionally felt like I wanted to do. There were different stages. It's a long story, but sometimes I did, sometimes I did. Yeah, I won't go into that. But the first, often I did have a draw and an excitement, but there was also like that, I guess, difficult element of unsurety or trying to find where the peace was. Which was the journey in itself. But the first 2 in Australia. Then when I was 19, I went with a friend to the USA, and we stayed in 3 there. This was over the course of a month. So one was Carmelites again, ones that ended up coming to Australia actually as well. They hadn't moved here yet. They're in, I think, Mathura now. Another was Sisters of Mary Morningstar. They're also in Australia now, but they weren't at that stage. We knew these 2 orders were coming here. That's kind of why we went there, because it's like all the mother houses. We should try them there if they're coming here. At least we know what we've got in Australia. And the last one was just a Benedictine order, particularly devoted to Our Lady, because she's always been a very central part to me in my faith. So all the Marian, any order that had a very strong Marian aspect were the ones that I was drawn to. So yeah, that was only, of course, a month. Came back, didn't feel particularly called to any of them, but it was definitely worth it, because in that process I learnt a little bit of the discernment stages and interior phases, I guess, that discernment requires, which is sometimes hard to know. But once you've experienced something and tangibly acted on something, you can tell sort of where the peace is and your interior state, which is sometimes required to discern anything correctly by actually tangibly acting on it. Because if it's all just hypothetical or in your head, you can't really come to a solid answer. At least I couldn't anyway. And I would say that's the way a lot of people find. That's the same thing until you actually do something. So I did that. And then, so I came back, ended up not feeling called. My friend did for a while. She entered one. And after that, I was like, well, I don't think I'm called to religious life at this stage, or at least not these. So I'll let God take care of it. I'll just surrender it. If he doesn't want me, that's fine, even though it kind of like, it would be nice if you did, but also if you don't, I'm happy either way. So I sort of put that on hold, or I guess let it go. And then I went to college in Sydney for 3 years, which I really loved. But I guess that question wasn't fully answered. The first year it was kind of under the surface, but the second year it sort of resurfaced. It's like, no, I feel like there's still something there. And I just wanted to answer the question, because, if you have this option and you never kind of come to a yes or no, that in itself is just unsettling. So I guess that sort of, came back. And wanting to do God's will, I guess that was the main motivator, because obviously he's the most important thing in life. And if his will is for our good and for also his glory, then I just wanted to be in that. And that's where the peace is as well. So yeah, I guess that sort of hadn't been fully answered. But then I finished my degree, Bachelor of Liberal Arts, which I loved, at Campion College. And from there, I went in November of 2021. So even before I graduated, it had to be this way, just due to the state of the world and all the lockdowns and everything. the only way I could get through was a short period of time. So end of November 2021, I went to Italy for to an order that I had for a couple of years been sort of interested in, but like not in the sense that I would be able to discern with them, just because again going to the other side of the world is a lot.
Yeah, of course.
Logistically and even emotionally and practically. So I went there and I was there for a total of 4 months, nearly 5, and that was kind of that was the last and solid sort of serious effort or I guess jump into the religious discernment. That was a long time. The others had only been a week or less. They hadn't been like a long term sort of, I'm going to sit on this and see. So that was like the that was the real deal. It's like, okay, if it's this, then I'll do a solid time, and if I don't feel called to it by then, I'm pretty sure it's not religious life. That was kind of the sense I had. It wasn't like an arbitrary decision. It was more just like this is it. This is kind of the peak of this chapter of discernment in my life, and that went very well. It was very intense. It was very difficult. Probably the hardest time in my life due to various aspects around it, but it was worth it. And like I'm glad I did it, because had I not, I think I'd still have that question in my mind. And it definitely brought me close to God in many things, and even in the suffering like that. There was a lot of pain around those things, and even though it wasn't fun, like often that can bring you closer to Christ. Like, and there was fun aspects, obviously. It wasn't all just pain, but there was definitely a strong element of pain that I hadn't necessarily expected for the whole couple of years from about 19 to 23. Yeah, so it was definitely a journey.
Yeah. I mean, you've given it a red hot go, so kudos to you. And I think, God will certainly reward your faithfulness, because most people are not going to so intently examine and discern all of the angles of religious life that you have. I think it is going back to the evangelical counsels that Jesus gives to us in the Gospels, that St. Paul shows us as well. And that kind of makes it clear this tradition that I think we've lost in the church, that a young person should be taught that, well, first discern whether religious life is for you or not, before you go and pursue something else.
And it also is simpler, because it's like with something like that, if you feel drawn at all, you don't have to. It's not like dating where you sort of there's another person involved. It's more you and God. Obviously, in dating there's God too, but it's more like something you can do without affecting someone else, or it's just a bit simpler.
Yeah.
That the path.
Well, you don't have another fallen nature with free will that you're discerning with.
Yeah, so it's probably a bit
something
simple.
might actually be good for you, but the other person's fallen nature might, lead them the wrong way from what may have been, a successful relationship.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
very complicated when you get into it from that angle, isn't it?
Yeah. But yeah, so if you don't, it's not like everyone needs to discern, or you should, absolutely have to. But I would say it's definitely not a negative if you do, even if you don't necessarily just feel like so emotionally excited about it. If there's a little draw, it's like there's no harm just going to a convent, going to a seminary for a week, and just because like none of that, I don't see any of that those years as wasted, and none of that time's wasted for whatever you end up doing.
Of course, yeah. Yes, well, any time we give to God's not going to be wasted. I mean, he's going to work it according to his plan, and we're not going to understand really until after this life what he did with that time, and what he did with even the little things in our daily lives that we do to say yes to him.
Yeah.
So you're obviously still living out missionary discipleship and courageous discipleship in various ways as a laywoman now. So do you want to talk about what you've done in that space, and what you're doing, what maybe you're looking forward to at the moment?
Well, there's a couple of things this year. One was I didn't actually end up doing it, but I was interested in going to the USA for like an internship with Theology of the Body Institute. Because of the timing in their seasons, it didn't quite work out, just because of logistics of their courses and the time that would fall. It'd be over a lot of their holidays, which means there wouldn't be work enough to do. But I was very interested in doing that if God wanted it. But one thing I did do in October, I did a month-long mission school with the Immaculata community, and that was just a month of I guess, deeper formation and mission work with other young people. And I really love that. Like, I knew it'd be good, but it was better than I even thought, which is nice. And it was really fun as well. It wasn't grueling, or I found all of it very good. So I did that, and I really enjoyed that. I've done a couple things. Like, I haven't done any major, massive things. Some people do like big mission trips, and but as of yet, I haven't done anything massive in that sort of formal, official way. But when I was at Campion, a few of us students would do. It was just a student-run thing, a thing that we called street mission. So we'd go out at night, maybe, once every 2 weeks or once every week, depending how busy we all were. And it was just a bunch of us. It wasn't like an organized thing. We'd just message a group and a group chat and say who wants to do missions, street mission tonight. I would go out to the city. This was in Sydney. Go out to the city and talk to homeless people. Like, anyone would find, we'd talk to them. And sometimes we'd give them miraculous middle. Or sometimes we'd just talk to them, because like often they don't have any human or good human interaction. So that was something we did. I've done a little bit of Vinnie's volunteering in the past when I was a bit younger, maybe 17, 18. And that was good. That was with children from disadvantaged homes. And I also just love, this is not official mission work, I guess, but something I've always found fun, and this is ever since I got into the workplace, is just talking to co-workers about anything faith related, if they're open. Like, if they're not open, there's no point, because it's going to shut them off even more, because it's just like you're almost force feeding it. But often I'd get into conversations, people would ask things about my life or the way I live or family, or just because I guess I don't come from the typical maybe way of living or family background, and people would be interested in that. Sometimes they would mock it, or be a bit off put. Yeah, they would sometimes you get negative approaches to it, which is like, that's part of it, and it didn't bother me too much because I'm confident in it. I don't mind. Sometimes it's just funny anyway, but often people would ask questions about either faith related things or just the way that we live, or like I live, or people I am friends with live, and I've done that in every job I've had. When it comes to the point of that, like, not straight away, but as soon as they get to know you and trust you, and they start finding out things about you, often the questions will come, and I enjoy that. Like, I don't really find it intimidating. Sometimes it can be a bit awkward if you're the only one, and sometimes people think you're a bit of a weirdo. That's just funny though to me. But I quite enjoy it, especially once you know the person. If it's just a random, there's more kind of, you don't know where they're coming from, but once you know someone in a workplace and they know you, there's more room to have like respectful and real conversation, not just them throwing things at you and you trying to fight back or throw things back at them. And I've done that like in a few of the workplaces, and there's a couple of people who I'm still friends with now who I'll see every now and then, and we still talk about things like that. There's actually one kid. This is only a little kid though. He's only 17 or 18, and on coming back from the month mission in October, I was talking about the Holy Spirit a little bit, or like someone asked me about something, and then I gave them that answer, and he was there and he was listening. And then afterwards, he said something to me when this other person had gone, and he was like, basically like, he was saying that he was sort of interested in God, and he only said that because of what I brought up. And then from then we kind of got into discussion of like, what's my background, and I was explaining Catholic, and he asked me what I'd been doing for the month, because I'd been away from work for a month, and I told him. And then I asked him his, and he said, no, I've got no religious background. I was baptized, as a lot of people are, but nothing further than that, and my family's not religious or anything. But he said, and this is just like a 17-year-old boy, he's just finished year 12, going on schoolies and everything. He said, but I got the Bible out recently. It's all dusty and like old, and I've never read it, but I got it out and started reading it, and I want to know more. And from that, now he's asked me more questions, and he's actually asked to come to the mission school in January with the Immaculata community. So hopefully we can get him there. So just stuff like that. It's not formal mission work, it's not official, but just, I guess, evangelizing in the culture in natural ways, I quite enjoy.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And in any of your time since you've been taking your faith seriously, have you witnessed or experienced any miracles or any of the supernatural? I think good to get those stories from people. It raises the level of faith for all of us, I think.
Like, do you mean personally to me, or just hearing of them?
Well, let's go with personally at first, but then then you can share more broadly than that if you like as well.
Well, personally, I haven't. Like, I'd have to think about it for a bit, because there's a lot. There's a lot I could go through, but there's no, like, I haven't witnessed personally any major supernatural miracles or dramatic sort of events. My sort of faith journey, I think, has been very sort of calm, but like steadily inclined, but no sort of, lightning moments or massive events that have just changed everything. Whereas some people do, they have in their lives massive conversions or big events that will just blow them away. Whereas I think mine's always been like, I don't have an exciting dramatic story to tell people. Like, there's a lot I could tell, but it would take a long time, and there's a lot interiorly, which is often hard to get across to people because it's
Yeah, it's
interior.
happening at more of an interior level,
Yeah,
and
and
many
yeah,
people are not going to be able to understand the movement of the heart without
mm,
really knowing you, I guess.
yeah.
And yeah.
But one thing that I would say is, like, Eucharistic adoration. I've always loved that. Since I got a car, there's a chapel near us, and I've got a key. So often after work, I'll go there for a bit. Try and do that most days if I can. And there's been a lot of grace from that. But again, that's something that I can't really point to, because a lot of it's interior, and it's very hard to explain. It's not that you can say, "Oh, this happened," and it's just a slow, intense process. But yeah, nothing personal like that. I've heard of a lot of miracle stories, and people who I know they've had experiences, but me personally, at least what I can think of now, nothing. There's been little, like, little signs and God coincidences and things like that, but nothing
Yeah.
where it's nothing that I
What's the
can think
most
of.
impactful miracle story that you've heard that perhaps has happened to a person that you know personally?
I probably have to think about that one, because I've heard a lot, but it's hard to recall when you got to think of
Yeah.
one particular one.
I'm putting Grace on the spot here, everyone. I only told her like 2 minutes before we started what I was going to ask her.
um, well, actually, no. This is not. I don't know if you'd classify this as a miracle or maybe a mystical experience, but this, again, someone at work who's not Catholic, not even Christian, come from a very broken background. Like, his father killed himself when he was little, and just very, very sad background, but like tragic. But this was someone who I started talking to about the faith and things like that, and he told me, and I think this is still a work in progress, so it's not like his whole life's turned around, but he's definitely on the path upwards. He told me he had a car accident. It was last year. He had, like, quite a bad car accident. He was driving, and this big Ram Ute truck, like, head collided into his car, and he basically went out of it, like, blacked out, whatever. I don't know. Could have almost, like, it. He showed me pictures of the crash. Like, he technically should have been dead, but he, like, when he was black, he saw, like, this, like, it was the face of Christ, basically. And he even said, like, I saw Jesus. He didn't really know how to explain that or what it meant, but he said, like, I saw Jesus. And he had no background of anything. And he described the face to me. I said, well, like, what did it look like? He said it was like this maybe 30-something-year-old man, and he was looking at me, like, his face was like, the best way he could describe it was like someone who'd come back from war, which I guess means, like, bleeding and bruised and just ruined.
Yeah.
He's like someone who'd come back from war, and, like, that's what Jesus's face would have been like on the cross, and worse. But he said he was just, like, gazing at me, and his eyes, like, they looked sad and sort of disappointed, but also loving, because, like, you'd have to know the whole background of his life and everything, but, like, they were loving, and he, like, very. He'd have to explain it to you, because I didn't see it, but he said they were, like, the piercing gaze. It was very comforting. It wasn't like, oh, this guy's not impressed. It was sort of, I guess, a sorrowful but loving look. And he said, and he came back from that. He said it was only a second, and everything just went, like, paused. It was just like he said, and it kind of sounds weird, but there's like this force field around me, I guess. And then this, like Jesus, his face was there. And he said everything was just silent and paused. And then it only lasted, he said, a couple of seconds, but it seemed like everything around him went still. And then he said that was when he blacked out. And then he said when he came to, he just got out of the car and walked off. Like, and he should have been, if not seriously injured, dead. But he was fine. He said, I just got out of the car and walked. And he said, from that moment, I felt a lot lighter interiorly. Like, he couldn't really explain it, but I felt better. Like, life wasn't as dark as it was. I didn't feel as, I guess, despairing. And it was just because of the gaze of this, well, God, really. He couldn't articulate it that way. But, like, the gaze of Christ heals. And that's what he witnessed. And I think from then, his life, and he's very interested in God and very drawn to Jesus Christ now, and I think he's on that journey from something like that. And this is just a random guy who works at a cafe. He's just a chef.
Yeah.
And like, this is no one who you'd think,
amazing.
you're having mystical experiences or anything, but something like that, it's like it just proves, I don't know, everything, because you don't have to be religious to witness God.
Yeah, the overflowing and abundant mercy and love of God to reach out to somebody in such a particular way that before they even know really who he is, or they've made any effort to change their lives in any way whatsoever, he shows his face to them. And the guy can't even articulate whose face it is, but he just thinks it.
But somehow
he
knew it was Jesus.
When somebody else hears,
Yeah, but he did know it was Jesus, but he didn't kind of understand what that meant. Like,
what does that mean for him?
Yeah, he just said, "Oh, I saw Jesus," but he doesn't understand. He can't really say anything more than that, or can't explain why or how it happened, or what the effects of that mean.
Yeah.
But yeah.
That's incredible. It's awesome to hear stories like that, to hear how God's working to pursue the souls of, just everyone around us in society. Like, he's got a plan to save each person's soul. I think sometimes we forget that, and it's not good for us to forget that, because the point that he wants us to remember is that he wants us to cooperate with the fact that he is trying to pursue all of these people's souls. Yeah, amazing. I'm going to segue into the topic and the idea of Gen Z, because look, I've just been involved in running an Alpha course in a high school, and these are year 10 students, and we've been going through all the videos in Alpha. If anybody who doesn't know what Alpha is, it's a charismatic program. So it's a very creative and beautiful way of proclaiming the gospel. Who's Jesus? What does it mean to have faith? How do I pray? But in a very creative and educational, but also entertaining way, in a way that speaks in the language of a young person, like of a Gen Z person, I guess. So we've been through all the episodes of the Alpha program, and we get to the last episode, and there's a couple of different ones I can choose from, but it's coming towards the end of term, so I've got to choose one to finish with. And there's an episode called Does God Heal Today? And in this episode of Alpha, it's just all these testimonies of people who have seen, either personally in their own lives or in somebody they know very, very closely, miraculous healing. And it's just testimony after testimony of miraculous healing. So we have that, and the way that they schedule or they format Alpha Youth these days is that there's sort of 5 minutes of video content, and then you pause the video and you talk about a question that comes up on the screen. And so I'm going through this content with them, and they're hearing testimonies of miraculous healing. Then when it comes to the small group time, I'm sharing testimony of where I've personally seen miraculous healing happen. And they're still just reluctant and nonchalant and like just nonplussed by what they're hearing. And that they say to me, well, maybe if I saw it happen to me personally, I'd believe it. And, that sounds kind of good. And I'm thinking to myself, I was really hungry for this my entire youth. I'm a millennial. I don't know how different that makes me to Gen Z, but I was really hungry for that kind of thing. And I really latched onto those stories, even though I wasn't taking my faith seriously in my teenage years until I was 18. That's when things changed for me. But the fact that they're so blasé about hearing all these testimonies of miraculous healings and other events that God's doing in their life, it was it was kind of a shock to me. Like, it's really going to take a lot to get through to you guys. But what do you think as a Gen Z person, Grace? How do we reach these young people? Like, what speaks to their hearts?
Well, that's a massive question and very
Yes.
broad. But one thing, like I think now, just young people, whatever, whether young teen or early 20s, because I'd say from my generation, or maybe even a little bit lower, grew up on technology, and like I haven't done any studies on this, and it would take a while for me to articulate, but I feel like it's really numbed like our souls, really taken like an edge of wonder or sort of receptivity. Christopher West actually in some of his video talks about like anesthetizing to beauty or just to life in general.
Yeah.
And I think that comes from social media a lot. Like I really have a gripe with social media. And just on like technology in general. I'm not to say all technology is bad or evil or it's horrible invention, but I think obviously with our fallen
Here we
nature,
are using technology.
yeah, obviously there's good things, but as humans and our fallen state, anything that's neutral will tend to use it. It'll go downhill unless we're making active efforts.
The majority of people are going to use it in a way that
wrong,
promotes vice.
It's like the entropy. It's like unless you make active efforts to, bring something up and build it up and make it, good and flourishing, it will go downhill by default. And that's kind of what happens.
That's a good analogy.
With anything neutral, unless we make active efforts for the good, it will just automatically go downhill. It doesn't mean the thing itself is evil, but obviously with technology and the social media and just all that stuff, I feel like it's just really numbed our souls to sort of wonder, I guess, and receptivity to reality. Because if you're just stuck to your phone and that instant gratification and that constant stimulation, it takes a lot more to awaken sort of like a vibrant wonder or excitement to anything that's not it. Because like even chemically and neurologically, it numbs the brain, so the way the brain reacts. And obviously I can't explain it in scientific terms, but there are obviously people out there who can, and I think you know what I mean. And
it's
so
all
I think
about
that just
the
plays
dopamine,
everything.
really.
The what? Sorry, yeah.
It's all about the dopamine because with the phenomenon of scrolling and the way that we use scrolling, they purposely got psychologists who are experts in the way that gambling and slot machines work. And you go onto a slot machine. I've never actually played a slot machine before, but you walk into a service club and you see the guys playing the pokies and what have you, and you see these bright, colorful boxes that are spinning around. You see the different pictures spinning around in front of you, and you're really just waiting for the right one. And there's this kind of element of the thrill of the chase and this dopamine response, which would have been the same thing, or for those who hunt, for example, like for those guys who go hunting, this experience of the thrill of the chase and the motivation to continue chasing, like even when otherwise you would be quite exhausted, that's kind of how dopamine works. But they've hijacked that chemical response on a neurological level, and programmed it into our phones. So now we have it in front of us all the time. We can have this, I'm constantly scrolling and hoping for the thing that's finally going to satisfy me. But it's like the more I scroll, the more numb I feel. So the harder it becomes to find the thing that's going to bring about that satisfaction.
Yeah, or that excitement or wonder, and even just the vibrancy of real life and real living. It's kind of the shine is taken off, or at least the ability to take that in fully as a whole human person is just dulled. And I just So I think that would definitely be one aspect. Getting through to young minds who have grown up on that is just a lot harder because of that obstacle that we've never ever had in any time in history. So I guess it's a whole new world for us navigating this. And I don't think technology is necessarily always the answer, because sometimes people say, oh, we've got to work with the times and use what's given us. Like, yes, but also I think sometimes just getting away from that fabricated lifestyle, that very artificial, like it's just refreshing. Even like on the mission school I did, we didn't have our phones the whole month, except once briefly a week to call family or whatever, for about an hour or less. And you just kind of, you reset, like you reprogram your brain, just kind of, you can breathe a bit more, even if you're not on your phone all the time, or on technology all the time. Not having that there as a crutch or something to go to.
Yeah.
It's almost like what's it called when people on drugs, the rehab,
Rehab.
or
Yeah.
yeah, you detox.
Or a detox as well. You're,
Yeah,
you're
detox.
going to
Yeah,
be
that's the word.
detoxing your
Yeah.
brain chemistry. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a hard one, because obviously we can use it for good, but I think that atmosphere of technology that we live in is so suffocating that piercing through that kind of fog is made harder now. And I don't really have an answer to that. I don't know how you'd go about. But it's not hopeless. Like, there's still people. They've still got the same. It's just it's a new obstacle that we have to cut through, and I don't really know what the answer is.
Yeah,
For
I
that.
think when a young person can start to be a little bit more self-aware and honest with him or herself about the way that they're feeling and just their experience of life, that might be helpful, because then it might be useful to actually use social media, because that's the only way you can communicate with them, to explain to them the fact that the reason they might be feeling a lot of restlessness, a lot of stress and anxiety, may be somewhat to do with the amount of time that they're spending using their screen. And if you can do that, get them to do detox, and then have a physical presence, like like a community around a church, for example, that they can tap into when they're detoxing from that. That's when they can start to voice their concerns and also their questions in a safe environment, hopefully, and having real people who they can engage with face to face on that level is probably, that's the only kind of solution that comes to mind for me. I'm sure there are others. And it's like we said before, though, because God is trying to save everyone's soul, and He's got a plan. And it's not like He didn't know that this phenomenon of social media and now artificial intelligence and Web3 and the Internet of Things and all the different challenges, many and sundry, that are coming their way, and all of our way, really. It's affecting all of us in one way or another. He knew that was going to be present, and He's still calling us as His missionary disciples to work through, with, alongside, or in spite of those things, to help save these young people's souls.
Yeah, because it does create like this sense of boredom as well. And even I notice it when, say, if I'm watching a YouTube video, or even if it's good stuff, you don't have to be just wasting time on nothing. But even if you're kind of going through a lot of good things, after being on a screen for you're just bored after. Like, it's almost like your energy's drained and your motivation's drained, and you don't want to do anything else, even though you don't want to go back to the computer or phone or whatever. It's just like, it just creates a sense of boredom with everything. And on a large scale, that will do that in the spiritual realm and physical realm, even if they're not conscious of it. So I think there's so many effects that we don't even realize at the moment, because it's such a new thing as well. It's like it's in the last kind of 10 years that it's really become such a present thing. Because I remember when I was like 10 or something, Mum got her first, or no, actually a friend visited and she had a touchscreen smartphone, and that was so weird. It was like, how is this real? Like, you touch it and it's like you don't have to have buttons, and it's this flat screen, and that was such a novelty. And yet that was like 10 years ago or something, a bit over 10 years.
Yeah.
And so it's like it's almost developed too fast for us to know how to. And now you're giving it to like 13-year-olds. Like, who knows what that's gonna do when they're an adult? Like, we just don't. It's kind of scary.
Absolutely. I mean, speaking to my own experience as somebody who wasn't raised in such a devout household as you were, I was given a phone when I was 13 as well. It wasn't a smartphone. We didn't have smartphones when I was 13. I was given a flip phone. But within 2 years, phones, they weren't really what you'd call a smartphone now, but they were at the level where you could go onto a version of the internet, like a simplified version of the internet, and there were different apps that were coming about where you could go into chat rooms and talk to people who you have no idea who they are. And I really got sucked in by that. And looking back at that time of my teenage years, I was addicted to being in these chat rooms and talking to different people, and trying to find girls to talk to on chat rooms. it was very bad.
Mm.
But it was like nobody had the moral context to really know how bad this was and how it could be affecting somebody's brain.
It's
So
so
look, yeah,
unreal as well. Like it's not real. It's not
it's not
reality.
real.
Like
Yeah,
I don't even like
not real.
online chats, even though obviously I have to partake in them, and sometimes they're fun. But or even to connect with friends, I appreciate that. But it's got this unsatisfying, left for wanting feel to it. It's
Yeah,
like it's not real. I want the real person. I want the real thing. I don't.
yeah,
It's so unsatisfying
it's
because
true.
it's not real. It's not based in reality. It's very intangible and
Mm.
yeah,
Virtual.
element of artificialness.
Yeah, and I mean, you're seeing that being taken advantage of now with the phenomenon of deep fakes. I don't know if you've heard much about deep fakes
I
and what
don't know
that is.
much, but I've heard.
Well, they can superimpose, my face, your face, at my voice or your voice onto another body, and using AI, they can change the emotions on the face, they can change the inflection of the voice, they can even script the voice because they'll have enough tonation from you, from whatever they've been able to pick up from online, so that they can make it sound like you've said something. So,
Yeah,
and then you think about that, and you think about celebrities and the news and that sort of thing. Like the
politicians.
entire thing can be made up.
Yeah,
You can
yeah.
you can be sitting in front of the 7 p.m. news, and you can see the prime minister's face come up on the screen, and you can hear his voice. But in all actuality, we have no way of validating that was actually him, unless you have witnesses who you trust who were in person in the same room as him when he said that. If you don't have those, the whole thing could be faked.
Mm.
It's pretty scary.
Concerning. Yeah.
Um, so as we deal with that's the mission field that we're dealing with, and obviously people who are deeply affected by that are going to be making up and do make up the majority of the population, and the majority of people who I guess you'd be ministering to as a young missionary disciple, as a young missionary. So talk to me a little bit, Grace, about the formation that you're hoping to go through in the coming months, and how you're looking to build yourself up as a leader, to be able to evangelize in such a difficult mission field.
Well, there's a few things that sort of that I'm thinking of doing and hoping to do. One is the Christopher West course that he's coming to Australia in January, the Love and Responsibility 6-day intensive course. It's accredited as well. You do, I think, an exam at the end of it and get some sort of certificate of some sort. I'm not exactly sure as to the official things that come out of that, but it's a 6-day intensive course from Theology of the Body Institute, generally in the US, in Pennsylvania somewhere. But
Yeah,
this is the first time they're coming to Australia, and this is the institute that I was in contact with them about doing an internship, which could have potentially happened just because of timing. And so yeah, they're coming to Australia, which is quite exciting. Chris West and a couple of his team to do that, and I'm really looking forward to that because that will be something very, very needed. And also, Australia doesn't have the formation that the US has at the moment. Like obviously the US is so much bigger, so they've got so much more of everything, good and bad, but it's growing over there, like the real deep, real Catholic formation. And it's growing, and Australia has a little bit of it, but we're still a lot smaller, and we still don't have the same stuff. So a lot of the stuff we source is from the US, and then, but what we need is like to bring what we can over here, but then also have it here as well, growing. Because if it's all overseas, it's like that's great, but we need stuff here too. And so things like this coming to Australia, so we get to experience it here and be able to grow from it here. So I'm really looking forward to that. That's exciting. And another thing is I'm still praying about it and still not sure as to how this will play out, but joining the Immaculata lay community in some form to help with, I guess, mission work, whether that's the long-term mission school, which they have every year, or whether that's just side mission work with them. Like they've got some long-term missionaries there who live sort of around, and they help the sisters and brothers and lay community with whatever mission work they have. So there's a few different options with that. A couple of my friends are doing it. A guy from Campion and a few other people I've known have done the long term, and they've loved it. And it's like an extended version of what I did over that month in October. And yeah, so they're sort of the two, I guess, major things like that I could that I am.
And what would you hope to do with the love and responsibility intensive that Christopher West is coming down to Australia to run? Like, what do you hope to do with that information and experience? I guess it's not just information; it's an experience.
Yeah. Well, I guess I love Theology of the Body and John Paul II's teachings, not just on that, but like just his whole, I guess, ministry. And learning that sort of stuff, because the culture is, especially in that regard, is just such a disaster. Like, it's a disaster on a lot of fronts, but I'd say that front is one of the most chaotic, just wreck. So that sort of stuff, not only learning for yourself is good, but having that knowledge to speak to others about and even just live out, and having, I guess, reasons for the hope that's in you, like being able to explain that, because like you can live a certain way, but people ask you about it, it's like, I don't know, it's just what I do. Like, you kind of want to have an answer, or even a logical and attractive way of explaining why you do like live that way to people, because otherwise it's just they'll think you're a weirdo. But if you can offer them the alternate, better version of what the world says, then and offer it in a way that is attractive and beautiful, because it is. But unless you can articulate that, people won't understand. They'll just think they won't get it. They might see the goodness of it, but they won't understand the reasons behind it. And I think learning things like that is you're able to immerse yourself into the whole richness of the church's teaching as to why we live this way and why this is actually the real, genuine way of living. Like, it's the way God created. It's reality. It's natural law. And it's good and attractive and beautiful, and so much better than the counterfeit, mocking version that the world offers. Because it's like, our version's the real version. What the world does, that's not normal. That's abnormal. Like, they've taken the real deal and messed it all up, and then said, oh, this is the good, cool, normal way to live, and anyone who doesn't, you're a weirdo. It's like, well, that's kind of twisted. So being able to explain that and talk to people about that, because I've spoken to a lot of young people about it, just in everyday settings, not in official. I've also done, I forgot to mention, a little bit of, like, only a tiny bit of volunteer work with the Culture Project, which was something that was based in Sydney a couple of years ago during my college years, and I did that only a little bit. Some people did like year-long terms, but I was in university then, so I just did a little bit here and there and stuff like that. Even if you're not in an official setting, like, that was good, but most of your life you're just going to be living your everyday normal life, interacting with whoever you happen to be in your state in life. So having that tool, I guess, because I do enjoy talking to people, and I do enjoy explaining things to people, like the logic behind it, and showing them through words and actions why it's joyful and attractive. So I think this is just more of an extra tool, or more foundation, or more support on what I already love, and some of the things that I have. And young people are interested in it. Like, they do find it intriguing. They do find it fascinating. Like, people that I've had interaction, they do find the way that I and a lot of people are around live, because it is so different. I guess, in their eyes. So, and they are open to it as well. Like, I haven't really had much negative feedback on it. Like, they'll think it's weird, but I think deep down they see the beauty of it, and the freedom, and also the peace that it brings, because you're not just this emotional wreck from all these badly done, sort of immoral ways that the world encourages. So it does leave you a lot less damaged, if that makes sense. And especially a lot of girls. Sorry.
I was going to say, I think there's a lot to be said for that. It's kind of the difference between if you've spent all your teenage years hanging out at Macca's and all you ate was Macca's, and then somebody invited you to a 7-course meal at the most expensive restaurant in town. at first you'd feel a bit uncomfortable. You might feel like you don't deserve to be there. You might feel like you don't deserve to eat the food that you're being served. And you might not even appreciate how good that food tastes because your palate's not accustomed to it. But if you just spend a little bit of time there, because the people who invited you there are making you feel welcome and making you feel like, yes, you do have a place at this banquet table, then you start to realize how much better and how much more real it is, how much more alive it makes you feel. My background is obviously doing the culture project as well. Like I did that for 2 years, talking to young people and about their identity. And I think when you bring it all the way back to the level of identity, rather than talking about this moral issue or that moral issue, but who you are, your dignity created in the image and likeness of God, that starts to resonate with them, because when they start to realize that there is a worthiness there, not because of anything that they've done to earn it, but because they've been made in God's image and that he wants them to be with him in heaven, then it starts to resonate, and they start to think, well, my life is about a whole lot more than I thought it was originally.
Yeah, and it does leave you happier because you don't have all that. Like, obviously we've all got problems, but even I was talking to someone, this is even just a cultural issue now, like it's being brought up, girls with like a lot, and same goes for men, but it works differently in male and female. But the emotional sort of baggage that a lot of women have when they end up getting married, or when they enter a serious relationship, because of all the I guess trauma that the world says is normal to experience or go through, like that ends up coming up, and it will come up for everyone. And you don't have that if you live the way that God designs. Like, it's just not. Obviously, we've all been wounded and hurt, and it can even be in emotional ways, but that real serious way that so many people that just go through all these damaging relationships, all these men will use them, or vice versa, and it's just you come out a wreck. And it's sad because it's like they haven't been offered anything else. Like, that's what they've been told is normal. So it's not even their fault a lot of the time. It's like they've never been given an alternative. So of course you're gonna, like, why wouldn't you? Unless you've got some, deep wisdom, or someone, some, I don't know, special grace, which occasionally are people, but it's very expected that that's going to be the case if you're not given anything else. And things like this course, the Love and Responsibility, this is the stuff that it's trying to do: give people the alternative and the real version. Like, offer it to them, because if you never shown something, how are you ever going to love it or choose it?
Yeah.
So I guess I want to be part of that in whatever way, whether in official mission work, in the ministering that hopefully I can do too, because the Immaculata do uni ministry and school ministry, so even in that sense, or even just in everyday life. And also it's good for us, like it's so satisfying when you learn it. Like, it's so, even just learning it, and you're not necessarily going to act on it straight away. I just love that formation, like that intellectual formation, even if I'm not necessarily going to do something academically with it straight away, or even it's not like, oh, I'm doing this, so therefore I can act on this straight away. Just having that is I don't know, it's hard to explain, but it's just so satisfying, and I love it. Like, I just get excited over it, and then being able to use that in the service of others in whatever way God calls you to. I guess that's the purpose of it, because it's for us too. It's not just you're going to do this work with it. It's like it's for you to bring the fruits to others that Christ has given you, or share that grace. Because if you're never given it, you can't give it to others.
Faith as well, right?
Yeah.
It's building you up in your own faith and in your leadership too.
Yeah.
And so everybody who's watching or listening, whether you're watching live or you're going to get the recording of this, Lionheart's discipleship is a relatively new movement, but I am passionate about using this apostolate to form and to encourage and to uplift young leaders who are Lionheart's disciples, lion-hearted disciples, courageous disciples who are willing to kind of stick their necks out and live out their faith courageously. And that's something that Grace is trying to do here. And she's already doing it, really, if you listen back to everything she's shared about how she's courageously sharing her faith in the workplace. And so we've put together a little fundraiser to help her be able to attend the Love and Responsibility course being put on by the Theology of the Body Institute down in Sydney. It's happening at the end of January. And I'm just going to see if I can present share screen. I need to find out where. There it is. Still my first time using this. So it should be loading the page now, I guess. Tell me if you can see that, Grace.
Yeah, I can see. Yeah.
You can see it. So I got support young Aussie Catholic missionaries, and Grace is the first one of those. So we're just going to try and help Grace with $1,000 towards her attending this course. And I'm sure we can have you back afterwards, Grace, and you can give us a bit of a presentation on what you've learned during Love and Responsibility. So you can click here to give. I've got the link in the description of this video, whether you're watching it on Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. You can share it with other people, and you can even list your own prayer intentions. You can list that you're praying, and you can write down the prayer that you are lifting up to God for Grace and for young Aussie Catholic missionaries. So you can read about Grace's story here. You can read a bit more about her, and you can also put prayer requests in. So check out our page there on Give, Send, Go, and help Grace and others like her who we'll also have on our show, hopefully, as the need arises to sponsor people. The church is going through a difficult time, even financially, in Australia. And so I think as laity, those of us who are wanting to live out our faith boldly and courageously, it's time for us to come together and step up and support these young people. And so I'm hoping that we can gather a few people together to help and support you on your journey as a leader in missionary discipleship, Grace.
Yeah, thank you. It's a very good aim, especially not just for me, but for a lot of young people, especially those who are doing mission work, or I guess the financial struggle's big for everyone at the moment. It's not just the church, but particularly in the church. But yeah, it's definitely a very worthy cause because we need more of this, I guess, deep, real, traditional, authentic Catholic formation, which is quite hard to get, unfortunately, or at least in specific parts of the country. But it's definitely growing, and it's something that we need more of, because the more we show the beauty of the faith, the more people are drawn to it. Because that's the reason why I chose my faith, because I saw the goodness and truth and beauty of it. It's like, obviously I'm going to pick this. It's not like this set of rules that was imposed, like, oh, I've got to do this. It was like, I want this, because the other version is boring. Like, that's the boring, dull, unexciting version. Like, this is the adventure. And like, as long as you see that, that's when people choose it. And that's, I think, why me and my siblings have chosen it, because we were shown the realness of it, and the joy and excitement. And it doesn't mean it's not hard or very difficult or even painful at times, but it's rich pain, and it's worth it. It's not it's definitely so worth it. And I think that's the key to evangelization, is not just, and I think that's definitely the direction church is going. It's not just saying what the rules are. Obviously we need that. That's foundation. If you don't have that, you don't have a church. But to build on that and show why this is so good and why it's so beautiful and how they go together. Like John Paul's faith and reason, you need both. You need the structure and everything within the church, but also just showing the real face of Christ to people, because that's what will draw them in. And one thing that I quickly want to add, because just to add on, like the difficulty of evangelizing young people, obviously that is that big obstacle of just the numb culture at the moment, and the culture of death and just everything that we're up against. But I have even personally noticed, and this has only been the last maybe year or something, I feel like there's, and this is just through my own interactions, and I think other people have experienced too, but there is sort of a growing interest in young people from about, I'd say maybe 15 to 30, where they're actually turning towards God in some even subtle way. And this is just even displayed in the two guys that I talked about earlier, the chef and he's about 24, and then this other one, he's only 17. And they're actually on their own initiative, and nothing's been sort of thrown at them, or they haven't even had any background or sort of guidance since, but they're on their own initiative. They're sort of searching for God, and sometimes in a confused way, and sometimes they're not sure how to go about it. And that's why we need this formation and missionaries, and just even your average Catholic person, to be able to reach out to them. But on their own, obviously it's not them, it's the grace of God. But there seems to be, to me at least, a re-interest in the modern culture of a lot of young people, not everyone obviously, but there's this something growing, and not even just young people, even older people. You can even see the phenomenon of Jordan Peterson and his wife, who's recently, she's on her way to
That's right. Yes.
be baptized Catholic, RCAA. She's been praying the rosary and everything. Just things, and this is mainstream media. This is, everyone knows these people. It's not just these random little side characters who no one's heard about. This is like top level stuff globally. And then I've even seen it in the normal culture, where it's like this turning sort of, or at least searching for God. And maybe it's because we're just so disenchanted now with the rubbish. Like there's nothing new anymore. It's like we've kind of exhausted everything that the world offers. It's like it's all there. It's like the normal, but maybe we're starting to realize like this isn't actually the normal, and this isn't making us happy. And I think there's definitely some undercurrent of change, and it's very small and very slow and not noticeable unless you're looking for it really. Although maybe it even is, but I've just definitely noticed it just even in my interactions with normal kids, normal people, normal young adults, even older adults. There's definitely some seed of grace being sown. And whatever this means and whatever the Times is saying, like I don't know, but there's definitely something. And I think the more we have, the more we can offer to these people to help them in their search, because it's at the end of the day, it's not going to be us who do it. It's going to be God, like the grace of God. But we can, if we have resources and if we have a deep faith and we have a good example, we can help these people who are looking. And that's a good help, because at least they're wanting it themselves. If they don't want it themselves, it's very hard to get through. And that's probably what you experience with trying to show these young people. If they're not interested, or if they're just dulled and, got no interest in themselves, it's very, very hard to change that. It's possible, but it's definitely, you've got a head start if they're already interested, because you can just sort of draw them along with what they're already looking for.
Wonderful.
But yeah, I think that's definitely.
Thank you so much, Grace. Thanks for all your sharing, and thank you for your time today. And I really do encourage everybody to head over to the Give, Send, Go page, even if you don't have anything to give. But I'm sure you can give like $5 or something like that. It's not too hard. Offer a prayer as well on the page. It'd be great to see that. Great to see the prayers building up for young Aussie Catholic missionaries. And before I go, I just encourage you all to follow, like, subscribe, and share this video, so that these worthy causes of people who are really on fire for their faith and wanting to do their best wholeheartedly to spread the good news of Jesus Christ, our King. Just share it around as much as you can, everyone. We'd really appreciate that. So I thought we might just conclude with a prayer, Grace. So maybe we'll say a Hail Mary. I can say the first half and you can respond with the second, and we'll wrap things up from there. How does that sound?
Good.
Cool. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thanks again, Grace. Happy Advent and a Merry Christmas to everybody, although we'll be doing some more episodes before Christmas. God bless you all. Jesus is King, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you.